What's up out there? Let's talk about Righteous Fire. Now, this is the build that I used at the very end of Crucible League, and I started it off just to do a trial run for it. So I've actually played this on 2 leagues, even though I played a very short amount of Crucible League. This was my Trial of the Ancestors League starter. It's been basically what I've done a lot of work with. I've tried a couple other builds here and there, but I've stuck with this one because I'm really trying to learn this build. It's like call it a constant, if you will. That way I can go learn all the other parts of the game, and this one is something that is a known quantity, however you want to say that. And that's how I'm treating this. So I'm going to be going into this next league, whatever we get with Affliction. I'm going to start with this one because I know this build, I understand it, so I can continue learning the game and continue forward with that and have a good grasp on at least the build. And I also started this on the race league we got with Sentinel and Lake of Calandra, and I did very well with it, in my opinion. In what I did for probably a month with this build, with the Trial of the Ancestors, I did in about a week. So I think there was massive progress there, and this is a very solid build. So I wanted to give my thoughts on it and things that I've ran into and just the experience that I've had with it. So let's get started. Now, first up, we need to discuss the build itself. What I am following is Pox's guide out on pox.net. He has the Jug, the Inquisitor version of it. He's got all kinds of different stuff up here. There's an FAQ, there's a whole bunch of different links for crafting, some loot filtering, the written guide and stuff like that. This is a very well documented build. It is SSF friendly because that's how I've been playing. I did the race league as SSF. I ticked that box. And when we get into Affliction, I will be running Affliction as SSF. So that is a very good thing about this build. This is even guided. Like if you go into the build guide itself and you go to the tree, if you come down here to the bottom, there are different, depending on which level you're on, it will actually show you what you need to have on the passive tree. It even extends to which skills you're going to run at which level. So if you're at level 1 through 17, it's going to tell you some things. Now, the problem that I have with this is, as good as this guide, as good as the POB is for this whole thing, one of the problems that you're going to run into is that certain things are not listed in the POB. For instance, the Pantheon, and he talks about the Pantheon. Now, this is an edited version of this, but for this section right here is his notes. Somewhere down in here, I can't remember where it's at exactly, but he does talk about switching the Pantheon from one to another as you get further into it, but he doesn't tell you exactly which ones to go into in the first place. Where you find that is actually in the FAQ portion of it, which is over here, and I'd have to go through and find it, but somewhere in this FAQ, it tells you which Pantheon to go follow. So unfortunately, as good as all this is, there's stuff just splintered all over the place. And you go into, say, the written guide. The written guide starts talking about how to craft the helmet. It talks about using the brass dome. And none of this stuff is actually in the POB. None of it's in the notes. None of it's on the wiki, on his wiki page or anything like that. Like, there's stuff all over the place. And in fact, as I was going through and playing this, I remember distinctly in one of my videos where I found the brass dome and I said, hey, somewhere he talks about this, but I don't remember if it was in a video, in the POB, in the FAQ, on the written guide. Like, I had to go dig around to find it. I eventually figured out where it was, which is off on this written guide. It talks about the brass dome here. That's all great, but that's one of the problems that I have, is there's so much information just splintered all over the place. So what I've done to rectify that is basically sat down and pasted in certain things, like, because when I'm leveling up, especially like when I did this race league, I actually adjusted these notes for the race league, and I put this stuff in here. I pasted this in. This is from the written guide or somewhere along that line. So I pasted all this chunk of stuff in here so that I could know what the Pantheon I was looking for. I would know where to, how to get this 4-link trap set up, switching when you actually switch to Righteous Fire. And then even at the very beginning, you have to start with a witch and get these certain skills, gems and stuff like that. I put all that in here myself because it makes it easier to follow. In my opinion, I want everything in the POB. I shouldn't say everything, but I want the most important things in the POB to just follow it so that I can just level up and go and glance over instead of having to try to follow all these different resources. And another little hint that I would give is if you find other information, like I started throwing in here how to get, Essence of Horror. You gotta, for this, the map regex for life and mana recovery, because there's certain maps you don't want to run, so you put that in, it runs. Glove enchantments I was looking for. This is stuff you can put on your helmet. And then I actually put in the written guide in here a little bit for the crafting portion. Again, I just wanted it a one-stop shop, so I had to modify this myself, and I'm not like yelling at Pox or anything for that. I think there's just so much information there. It's probably an oversight. He's probably ran this a million times. He already knows what to do. But if you're going to, I guess what I'm trying to get at with this is, if you're going to run Righteous Fire and you're going to follow his guide, you can absolutely, and it took me a very long time to actually even think of this, you can actually go in and modify the POB, because you're just linking to it and saving it locally on your computer. He's got this broken down. You've got different sections depending on what level you're at. You will notice that you go from 70 to 80 to the 80 to 93. You'll see some different things change. You'll see this section in here has some things that pop up or switch. You'll see that this changes up here. You can actually mouse wheel up. You can mouse wheel up and down, or select up and down, however you change this. You can observe that there is a difference to these nodes that are coming up or changing. Some of these go away, like he takes some sections out and changes them over and goes a different route. I want to point something very specific out. If you go to this node right here and you go say at level 70 to 80, entering maps, blah blah blah, this one is set to regen 50 life per second. If I switch this down, you're not going to see a difference in it. But this is different. This now has nearby enemies have 50% reduced life regen. This helps with your DPS, but it's not an obvious change. Like I was showing, you can actually mouse wheel up and down and see the tree changing. But just because the tree has changed doesn't mean you don't need to go back and look at your masteries and verify that a mastery hasn't changed on you. That was something I happened to just be going through my masteries I happened to be going through all of the nodes just to make sure I was on the right one and setting everything to what was on this guide. But it doesn't tell you in the notes that changes. You only notice that it changes if you look at it and hover over it. So keep that in mind when you're going through and following the POB. Just because some other nodes changed doesn't mean that the masteries didn't, and it doesn't show you that it's changed unless you actually mouse over it and look at it. So keep that in mind. All right, let's talk about gear and crafting for a second. And I'd like to start off with the weapon portion of it. So I have a selection of different weapons that I've got down here, and I'm not sure exactly whether the Opal or the Void is the best. I haven't really looked in super great detail to see which one is the exact best one that you want, but they both kind of do the same thing. So what you're looking for, one of the things you're looking for, if you can get it, is +1 to level of all fire spell skill gems. And this is kind of a lesson that I've had to learn the hard way. I've been playing with this build, or with the build that I have going right now, all the equipment I've got. I've been tinkering around trying to find the right balance of things to give me the most righteous fire damage, to give me the better fire trap damage, just to kind of tinker around. And I ran with this scepter for a little while, which if I put this one on, my righteous fire is at 244,000, but my fire trap is 16,800 to 25,000 with 192,000 per second. If I put this one back on, this scepter I ran for a very long time, and I swapped it out for like a week or so, and now that I'm working on this video and tinkering with things again, I looked at this. My righteous fire number is down. It's now 236 instead of 244, but my fire trap damage is up. So this is now 18 to 28, whereas this here was 16 to 25. So my overall damage between both skills is up, and I was putting a lot more emphasis into Righteous Fire. So if you're unfamiliar with the Righteous Fire and how to find damage on it, this was another thing that somebody had to point out. If I can't highlight this, I might try to put an arrow on it while I edit the video, but if you look at this and you see that I've moused over Righteous Fire. It says Righteous Fire at the top. It's got the engulfs you in magical fire, blah, blah, blah. It describes it. Then it says 0.5 meters to radius, life tap, deals 236,000 damage per second. That tells you how much damage this is doing. Now, is that accurate? It's in the game, so I trust this more than I trust, say, POB or PoE Ninja or something like that. But this doesn't necessarily give you the full explanation of all the different things that's going on, like necessarily. But it's an indicator, so this is what I've been using. And I've been pushing to get my Righteous Fire number as high as possible, and I guess what I'm trying to point out here is that I've neglected my Fire Trap portion. And the +1 that you get on this all fire spell skill gem affects Fire Trap as well as whatever others. So I have +2 from global modifiers on here. So that's actually pushing Fire Trap up and helping my overall build. So it's lowering my Righteous Fire damage in the ring that Righteous Fire does, but it's helping raise the damage of everything else. So that is beneficial, and that's kind of what I'm trying to point out here. There is a craft to get this +1 to all fire spell skill gems, and this one I wanted to show as well. If you go to a vendor, and this has to be a normal scepter. It cannot be a blue one that's magic or a yellow one that's rare. It has to be a normal one. I made this mistake, and I tried to make this, and I'm like, why isn't it working? And so your fractured ones will not work. This has to be a normal item. So you cannot use fractured. I think that's what I was trying to do, is try to change a fractured one. But if you take a scepter, throw it in here, it's not going to trade for anything. You need to take fire spell skill gems. They could be support, but it needs to be a gem with plus 20% quality. So this body swap and combustion support are both fire gems, and they both have 20%. These total out to 40% quality. That's the key number you want to reach. That will give you a +1 level to all fire spell skill gems that then you can continue to build on. Now, once you get this, the only thing you can do is add modifiers to it. You cannot change this, otherwise you'll lose this. So say you get this and then you try to do an essence craft on it or something like that. You're gonna lose the +1 to all fire spell skill gems. Now, this trade also works. These all have roughly 10%. Now this has got 13 and this has got 12, but if I put all 4 of these in, I get the same trade. So it doesn't matter if you have 2 gems, 3 gems, 4 gems, it just has to total 40%. Now, what you do from there is you would take this and you would need to run an Orb of Alteration. Well, you could, you don't want to run an Orb of Alteration because that would actually lose the fire spell skill that you've got. You would want to run an Orb of Augmentation to add a skill, then you'd regal it, and then you'd probably run some Exalteds on it to add more modifiers to it. However, every time you do that, you run the risk of losing. I shouldn't say you run the risk. You run the risk of getting stuff that doesn't pertain. So this scepter here has all fire spell stuff on it, or fire damage of some sort, burning damage, whatever, but it's also got increased attack speed. So if I dropped an Exalted on this and it added cold damage and lightning damage and everything else, that's kind of not as good, but you're still getting that +1 level to all fire spell skill gems, so you're getting a benefit overall, if all that makes sense. Now, if you were crafting this with essence, you would actually want this here, which is, I think it's the Deafening Essence of Fear. This, or any of these of Fear, because they will add minion damage. Did I get the right one? Yeah, one-handed weapon, minion steal, plus whatever. That's this one here. This is a minion crafted one, this Armageddon crack. This one here has minion steal, 93% increased damage. I was trying to push my Righteous Fire damage as much as possible, but because I was doing that and pushing the Righteous Fire damage, as you see, I actually neglected the Fire Trap damage that this gets from the global modifiers. So, as far as weapons go, that's kind of where I'm at with this. Let's move on. All right, let's talk about helmet real quick here. So the helmet that I am running is not exactly correct. This one I think would be better served if I put my Righteous Fire into the helmet because of the less duration support. We'll get into that here in a second, but with this particular helmet, the burning damage and the less duration does not appear to work with Fire Trap, but it's the helmet that I have and it's the best one that I've got, and what I have for now. It is an Elder helmet. Ideally, this would be pure armor and not have evasion rating on it at all. Unfortunately, this is the best helmet that I've got, but it does 34% increased burning damage. It's got a little bit of increased armor on it. I don't know if stun recovery and stun and block recovery matters, but I was able to craft lightning resistance on it, which I needed. And this suits me for the time being. This could certainly be a better helmet. I've been keeping my eye out for one, but I haven't gotten it. When I do move Righteous Fire up into this, at some point I would be looking to move Righteous Fire up. I would need to get some Awakened gems and stuff like that I don't have right now. But if I was to move all that up into here, at least a less duration would work. I'm not sure if the burning damage would correspond. I don't believe it does. If we go in here to burning damage, it does not support Righteous Fire. So this is not necessarily a good helmet at all for Righteous Fire or Fire Trap or anything, but the less duration would help. So ideally I would need to have a good, and the reason you want the Elder helmet is because it's very easy to get this socketed gem supported by in here. So if you get one that's an Elder helmet and you can craft that on using these Orb of Transmutation to get this into a magical item, and then using Orbs of Alteration to get that in there. There is much better affixes that you want in here, but much better modifiers. But this is the one that I rolled, so I kept it. I've been keeping my eye out for a better helmet, but they're kind of hard to come by in an SSF world. But ideally, you want to have as much armor in there. That is a deficiency that I know this has. I could have a lot better armor on here, and I could have a lot better helmet if I had the right one. I would also need Essences of Horror, which I've been trying to get. I've just not been successful in getting them. So lesson learned on this is to make sure that I get an Elder helmet. I understand why it is now. I've tried other helmets, but you don't get those socketed gems supported by level whatever somethings. This one just happened to be the best one I've got. Like I said, I'm hanging on to this because if I ever move Fire Trap up into, we've only got a week left in this league, so I doubt I'll get there. But if I ever move Fire Trap up into here, it would be supported by less duration. So let's move on. All right, let's talk about armor for a second. I have the Brass Dome. Now, this is one that Pox actually mentions in one of his guides. It was in the written guide, not in the POB and not on his website or anything like that. And once I found this thing, I had to go figure out where it was in the guide to go see what he said about it. But the thing with the Brass Dome is it offers 3,500 armor. Now, this is also plus 26% quality, which I got from a Syndicate craft, doing one of the safe houses in there. But I also put on, I believe this is an enchant from the Labyrinth where it's got quality does not increase defenses. It grants 1% fire resistance per 2% quality. I don't know if that was worth the effort or not, but I got it. I was doing some lab runs for some other reasons. I got this and I thought, well, all right, I'll check it out. This, I don't know if it made the difference or not, but it's not bad. Now, when I got this, I think it was a 2 socket. I don't even think it was linked or anything. And I had to get it to 6 sockets and linked. I did get it all done, and I did spend some time trying to get the colors changed on it, but I ran out of currency. Basically, I'm playing as SSF, so if I run out of currency, I don't just go sell something and have more currency. I have to go generate more currency. So with currency being at a premium, I've had to run this like it is. With the gems that I've got, this is where my Righteous Fire runs. I have Burning Damage, Elemental Focus, Swift Affliction, Life Tap, and less duration. Now, the reason I'm running less duration is I should have a 3rd blue socket for efficacy. But because I don't have that blue socket, somebody mentioned that I tried more duration, but somebody said I should do less duration. And this gives you 19% more damage. So if I look at my damage here, I'm doing 236. If I take that out, I'm doing 198. So this thing does, even though I don't have the right colors for everything, I have most of it there. I'm missing one. I was able to put something in that actually still benefits me, maybe not as much as efficacy does, but within my currency limitations and within all of that, I'm still doing more and I'm still using it as a 6 link. Now, I also found this Empower gem. Now, this thing I've got to level 3. When it was level 2, it was not better than the less duration, but in the course of making this video, I found out that if I put this on, it actually gives me 240 versus 236,000. So at level 3, this has now overtaken the less duration gem that I had on before. So this, again, just because it's off color doesn't necessarily mean that you have issues running you can try to find something else that fits in better, I guess is my point with this. So I'm kind of making the best that I can out of the situation. Now, I want to point out something else. Well, I got two more things I want to point out. Vol Righteous Fire, is it worth it? No. It is not necessarily any better than Righteous Fire that is at, say, I should have one in here. I should have found this earlier. Do I have it? I do not. Did I trade that out or did I misspell it? I don't know. I don't have one. So I used to have a plus 20% Righteous Fire, which I do not see. Maybe I traded it off. I might have traded it for one of my... I don't have it out here, do I? Nope. I don't know what I did with it. But I don't have it to show. So I found this Vol Righteous Fire and I thought I would try it. If you take this gem out and you look at the damage of it, a full level 20, 20% quality Righteous Fire, regular Righteous Fire, it also deals 2447 damage. So if you're looking at this thing deals 2,447 damage, 0.9 if you want to get precise about it. This also adds the Vol Righteous Fire to it, so you have a second Righteous Fire you can turn on, which is a bigger ring. Now, if you get a regular Righteous Fire skill gem up to level 20, you quality it up to 20, you use the trade where you can trade the level 20 gem with one Gem Cutter's Prism, get it to 20% quality, and then re-level the gem up. That fully leveled up, fully qualityed up gem is equal to Righteous Fire where it's at. So there's not really any difference between it. The only thing you gain with the Righteous Fire gem is the Vol Righteous Fire. Now, the problem is if you read this, you sacrifice 60% of your total energy, shield, and life. So the problem is when you kick that Vol Righteous Fire in, it takes your health and tanks it almost to nothing. And if you're in the midst of a boss fight and taking a lot of damage, you run the risk of dying you have to pick and choose the moment to release that. But the problem is the Vol Righteous Fire doesn't really add that much to it. So you take this massive health spike, but you don't really see a lot of damage out of it. So is it worth it? No, not really. I keep this on here because I've already leveled it up, but there is no real appreciable difference of running this thing or not. The next thing I want to point out is something about Swift Affliction. So if I take Swift Affliction off and I mouse over it, you'll see that it works with Righteous Fire. If I take Life Tap support out of that, you will see that it no longer works with Righteous Fire. And I've noticed this with a lot of other builds, not just Righteous Fire, but say maybe, I don't remember if it was Tornado Shot or the Witch build that I was using for Necromancy or whatever. I don't remember which one it is. I've tried 5 or 6 different builds so far, in addition to Righteous Fire, but I've ran into a few where they want you to put a skill gem in that doesn't say that it supports or a support gem that doesn't say it supports the skill gem you're working on. In this case, this does not say it supports Righteous Fire. However, you put this Life Taps gem in there and it does support Righteous Fire. So what's the difference? The difference is Life Tap has the duration tag on it. And I had to do some reading and really digest this when I had to read a few different Reddit posts and a few different times. I read these over and over to try to get what they were saying. And I think I understand it now. So because this is a support gem with the duration tag, when you drop this in here, you've now added the duration tag to Righteous Fire. What I thought was, the way I thought this worked was that Swift Affliction had a list of skills that it worked with. And if it wasn't on that list, it didn't work with it. Now, if you notice, Swift Affliction has support, duration. So it needs that duration tag. So what I've figured out, what I think the way this works, is because the support gem, Life Tap support, works with Righteous Fire, it adds that duration tag. And because it adds that duration tag, it now allows Swift Affliction to work. Now, you will notice that the Vol Righteous Fire, the regular Righteous Fire does not say duration on it, but the Vol Righteous Fire one does have duration on it. Why Swift Affliction does not work with the Vol Righteous Fire one, I don't know. I have no idea. But you still have to have Life Tap to make that work. So that was a huge revelation. I was super stoked when I figured that out, because once I understood that the support gems are not tied to specific skills, they're tied to specific tags. So because you can add a different gem, a different support gem that adds that tag to this skill, that made so much more sense, and it kind of brought together a whole bunch of things for other builds that I've noticed where I go to buy the gem and it doesn't, I go to buy the support gem and it doesn't say it supports that skill. This explains it, because as you add the other skills to it, you eventually get the one that works with it that ties the two together, if all that makes sense. So I definitely wanted to cover the fact that I've got less duration and empower. I also wanted to talk about Righteous Fire, and I certainly wanted to talk about this Swift Affliction gem, or support gem, because that was a huge revelation when I figured that out. And that is something that I will be able to use going forward in a lot of other builds, whether it's Righteous Fire or something else. So let's move on. Okay, real quick, I want to go through my gloves, my boots, my shield, and the belt. So the belt, I think the recommendation that you will always want to get is Immortal Flesh. Be careful if you try to Divine Orb this thing. I've actually made mine worse 3 times. I've put 3 Divine Orbs into it, and it's gotten worse each time. So I've gotten it down to the very bottom of where it should be. Gloves and boots, make sure you get movement speed on boots, otherwise you move super slow, and moving fast is much better. And really what you want is pure armor on all the helmet, the gloves, the boots, and the shield. You want pure armor on the armor as well. But you want as much armor on these as possible, and you don't really want evasion or energy shield, which I have. These happen to be the best things that I've got at the moment. I'm now that I understand what I'm looking for, I'm going to be keeping an eye out for better stuff, but this is what I have. So one thing that these gloves here, they have a Searing Exarch implicit that minions deal 16% increased damage. So that could probably be better, but I parked on this because we do have a node that any damage increase that minions receive, you also receive, so that helps out my Righteous Fire. Now this one also has Trigger Commandment of Inferno on kill. That's something I got from the Labyrinth. And the reason there's a different one that I tried for a second, but I like this one better. There's one that does a Fire Nova. I never actually saw that thing kick off. It never seemed like it worked. I don't know if it did anything or not, but I didn't like it as much. The Inferno drops a giant fireball down on people. So you kill on kill. So you kill one mob, it'll drop a fireball on a group of others. It's not always, but it's often enough that you see it dropping down and it's like, hey, that's kind of cool. And it can kill a pack, depending on, how much life is left in that pack or whatever. And sometimes you're just moving along, it'll kill a whole pack and you just keep going. So this is not necessarily a make or break modification, but if you're running Labyrinth and you want to get an enchant on there that does something, I think the Commandment of Inferno is pretty cool to do. For the boots, the enchant that I've got on this one is the 10% increased movement speed if you haven't been hit recently. And for an implicit, I've got 35% increased armor from equipped helmet and gloves. So if I get better helmet and gloves, these are going to improve my armor. The reason I keep these boots is they have 14% increased life regen. That is hard to give up. I did craft 24% increased movement speed on there. I got it to the point where I don't need to craft resistances so much. So I was able to put movement speed, and that is a huge difference. You definitely want movement speed. And then for a shield, I had a mixture shield for a while. I don't remember what it was. Actually, I could show that one. It's under my armor section. It should be this shield here. So this one had energy shield on it. The reason I had this one was because it gave plus 20%, plus 12% to all elemental resistances, and then it had another plus 9 down in the lower list. So this one really took care of a lot of my resistances for me. But I actually actively went out and tried to get this other shield on here, and I had to work with it. This one gives a lot more life regen. I was able to put some more increased armor on it, increased life. It's got fire resistance on it, plus 30 to max life. So this one's a little better shield than what that other one was, plus it's pure armor. If knowing what I know now, I need to make sure that my boots, helmet, gloves, shield, all that stuff, I'm going to make sure that those are pure armor as I go forward in the next build. But I wanted to point out some of the other things that you could add to it, like the increased movement speed. That 10%, if you haven't been hit recently, that came from the Labyrinth also. And same thing with the stuff that I have on my brass dome. I think that came from the Labyrinth. I'm missing the helmet enchant. I've been trying to get that one. That's what I've been trying to go for, but I've been getting these other ones instead. So Basically, nothing remarkable about this gear, but there are other things little things you can add to the gear, whether it's, the enchants and stuff like that, that make things slightly better and may improve this. Definitely keep an eye out for that. As much as I hate running Labyrinth, there are some good things that come from it. All right, to wrap up the gearing section, I want to talk about rings and amulets. So for a while, I was running this Deidre's Damning Ring. This one was really hard to get rid of because it gives you plus 23% to all elemental resistances. Now, the mileage may vary. This one is 5 to 20%, and then I've put some catalyst stuff onto here from Metamorph, and that boosts it up. I've got plus 15% to resistance modifiers. I need 5 more of these to get it up fully, but you can get 20% on the base one if you get it the right one. But the big thing is this one applies an additional curse. Now, this was another big eye-opening experience that I didn't quite understand. When I first found this ring, I didn't understand what it did. I didn't understand that you had to have an item that would apply a separate curse. So when I put this on, I thought it meant I could curse things twice. Like I could cast flammability twice or something like that. I didn't quite get what they meant by that. It didn't seem to do anything, so I took the ring off. And again, this is one Pox mentions somewhere in his stack of guides somewhere, probably in the written guide. And I looked at it and I thought, okay, it doesn't really do anything. And I didn't fully understand or appreciate what it did. But then I found out about elemental weakness, and that's another thing you can add with flammability. So I tossed elemental weakness in there, which I've got somewhere in here. It's probably up into 20%. Yeah, it's this gem right here. So what this here does, you can apply an additional curse. What that means is that you can, with this ring equipped, you can actually cast flammability, and then you can cast elemental weakness. So they both take effect, and you gain the effects of both of them. Now I have my shield charge, this down here, shield charge on my W key, and then I put flammability on Q and elemental weakness on E. And it felt good to have that W key for my shield charge. And I already had flammability. I was already used to using my ring finger and middle finger to push the Q and W button. So adding elemental weakness to E just felt natural. And then I'd slide over and hit my R for my Infernal Cry. And that seems to work out fairly well. Now, I probably need to get this back into that, and I probably can, but I traded that out. I traded the elemental weakness out because I found this Emberwake. I did one of those Voidborn Reliquary keys, and I got this Emberwake out of it, which I think I have an Emberwake somewhere in my unique stash anyway. And I wanted to check this thing out. This gives you plus 23%, or this gives you fire resistance, some more fire damage, some increased cast speed, ignite duration, chance to ignite, and ignite deals more damage. So I wanted to check this thing out. What I was basically trying is using this as a clearing mechanism, and the only way I could get that done was to put this, I got it to where I didn't need the elemental resistances off this ring, so I could swap this out, and then I had to change the color of this socket to get rid of this blue socket so that I could switch the other thing around, or I did that so I could get the Empower in, is what I'm trying to say. I need to recolor this 2 blues and a red so that I can get this back in there, and then I can just swap these 2 rings out. As it is now, I don't have to have this ring on. Like, this ring doesn't give me anything. This ring here is not a key to anything that I have. So I could put this other ring on, but now I need to get my socket color back on. I think this helps better in clearing because you can ignite everything and just blow it all up as you go. This seems really cool, but I cannot take this ring off because I need the dexterity. If I take this out, a lot of things break. So another thing that I wanted to mention on this is you may have to put like dexterity or something. Like I found this fractured ring here with the high dexterity on it, and then I crafted up some other stuff on it, got some LE resist on it, got some fire and cold resist with it, and then I put an increased damage on it just because I could. So I've got my resistance where I need to be, but I wanted to try out this other ring to see how this goes, and there's a lot of flexibility in here, but if you try something like this ring does all this ignite stuff, it's more for clearing than it is for single target. The the ability to apply 2 curses lets you do more on a single target. And I also wanted to explain, I wanted to make sure that I explained how the applying additional curse works, because when I 2 things happened. I found the damning ring once, and then like a week later I was rereading the guide and I noticed he talked about elemental weakness, and I tried that and it looked like it was going elemental weakness or flammability, and I didn't connect the 2 until somebody pointed it out to me and said I needed to use this other item, and I said I know what that is, but in it you don't necessarily have to have this ring. If you don't have this, you can put an enchant that you get from the labyrinth onto your amulet. Now you got to go find it. I got explosive impact on this one. I don't think I had the chance for the adding an additional curse, but I put explosive impact on this because I do have the ring. But I put explosive impact on here because this is an additional 30% increased fire damage and 12% increased area of effect. Now this is also in an amulet that has a lot of life regen on it, and it's got +1 to all fire spell skill gems, and it's got 9, I crafted on some increased area of effect and increased area damage. So this amulet is better than what I had, and what I had was one that granted level 23 to Malevolence and had some fire resist plus some other 16% all elemental resistances. So there's a lot of flexibility you can use with all the different things. Problem is this one being corrupted, I wasn't able to put the enchant on there. Wait. Explosive impact, I take that back. That did not come from Labyrinth. That came from... Where's that at? I think it's one of these passives. And I think, if memory serves, I don't know where it's at. I don't see it. It is not searching up. I think that's one of these keystone passives that you get from...
Oh, go on.
It was an anoint. That was an anoint that I had to put on there. That's right. So I had to go through whatever this is, whatever she does. Harvest. Couldn't think of the word. Well, I had to go into Harvest to get the oils for that. And I wanted to point that out because this was something I didn't know you could do either. You can get notables if you use the right oils. You can actually go into POB. It'll tell you which oils to use to get that put on your amulet. So I did put that on there. Now I'm also working on this with the catalyst from Metamorphs to get life and mana on here. The catalysts I put on this one were for attribute modifiers to boost up the dexterity and stuff that it offers on this one. And then this one I put elemental damage, which boosts up increased fire damage and stuff like that. So I've tied in Harvest, Metamorph, Labyrinth. There's a whole bunch of things going on with this that I've added a bunch of extra stuff to this entire build, which I could probably go in and add some more. The rings, yeah, well, I'm doing resistance modifiers on this one, so I could bump this up a little bit. But my point with all this is that there's a lot of flexibility with the rings and amulets. There's a lot of different things you can get. This corrupted one gives you skills like the Malevolence skill. I actually took the Malevolence gem out. I don't remember where I have that. I actually took this out for a while and used something else. I just had an open socket there for a little bit because I had this amulet on. The problem is it's corrupted and you can't really modify it. In the POB, Pox calls for Frostblink. I'm not very much of a fan of it. I don't really like it all that much. I think you only get one use out of it. I prefer Flame Dash. You get 3 uses out of it, so you can 1, 2, 3, and then it recharges and you're back to that. The reason I like that, number one, it's fire damage, and I'm already doing fire, so I assume it's going to do some damage with it. But I don't really use this for damage. The specific thing that I like about it is that I have multiple charges, so if I'm trying to get somewhere, I don't have to stop and wait for it to reset. It's there and I can hit it again. Now, eventually I will use all the charges up and I won't be able to go again. But if I'm in trouble and I'm trying to get out, or if I'm trying to get up in a ledge and I misstep or something and I don't click it right, I absolutely have another shot right there ready to go. Or if I don't go far enough, I like this much better than Frostblink. And then there's something about a Reflect. You can only leave Frostblink at level 1. I prefer to have stuff leveled up and not have the annoying little box that shows up. I know you can hide the box, but then if you go in and look at your inventory, it'll show up down here. I'm very tempted to click those boxes when I see them lit up. So I don't really like the idea of having one that I can't level up past level 1. So I prefer to use Flame Dash. Another thing that I want to point out is the shield charge itself. This one is a little odd. So if you short cycle it, you're not going to move. And this one took me a while to understand. This actually, where your mouse is when you're moving, defines how you shield charge. And you can actually short stroke it, or if you're up against a wall and you're not pointed at the right place, you won't go anywhere. What you want to do, especially like if you're in a tunnel, you don't want to have the mouse out here. You actually want to have the mouse like in the middle of the tunnel. So this one's not this is a fairly wide tunnel, so it's easy. But if you're in a narrow space, you don't want to be slightly off, otherwise you'll short stroke it and you won't go anywhere. If you're trying to move fast, you want to make sure and have your mouse in the center and as far away as possible. And you don't want to be over this stuff, any of the outside UI stuff, because you might short stroke it there. It gets kind of odd. It takes a little while to get used to this movement skill, but once you're used to it, it's not bad. I still short stroke it a lot, but you know, you're looking up at the mini map or something. I don't really like running the map all that much. As long as you have the mouse going in the right place, and if you're not distracted by, like I said, looking at the mini map or something like that, or short stroking it against walls, you can actually move around fairly quickly with the dash. All right, so to wrap all of this up, I wanted to talk a little bit about mapping itself. So when I go into a map, I will throw flammability out. I will do the Infernal Cry. A lot of times I start off with the Infernal Cry because it throws that dust or whatever it is over people, set them up for an ignite. Then I throw flammability out. So that's kind of how I roll with it. Every once in a while you'll see the meteor come out from the whatever this thing is called, the Commandment of Inferno. You'll see that pop down right there, just blasted through. So I'll throw flammability out. A lot of times, if you can just move through the crowd, you don't even need to throw flammability out. And especially when you have flammability and elemental weakness, one of the problems that you'll see is that you'll stop. You'll actually stop moving. Okay, so if you're in a shield charge, you can't actually do flammability. You have to be stopped. But if you're walking around and you cast flammability, you'll actually stop to cast it. So that is a little bit of a problem, especially when you try to do flammability and elemental weakness, especially if you're in the heat of a battle and you're fighting a boss or something like that, and you have to actually stop twice and drop the elemental weakness, flammability, and all that. You actually have to stop to do that. So you can actually take a serious amount of damage or potentially get one-shotted from that. So, and here's our shield charge move around. But I wanted to kind of just show how the build works, how my version of this works, what I've got going on right now. You can absolutely skip through a lot of stuff. This works really well. Drop off one of those Infernal Cries and just blast stuff. Narrow corridor, you get short stroke in that shield charge. I probably should have stuck around for the other thing that I was throwing out. But actually, yeah, I've lost a bunch of stuff. Gone the wrong way. But the one thing I wanted to point out here, and I don't see any monsters that are coming up, there are some things you want to avoid. There are some monsters, they're not very often, but they're there. They have, we're up at the boss fight already. So they will have a giant red ring around them. And those things actually drain you of your health. They drain you of your ability to regen life and health. You do not want to fight those things. The way you approach them, though, and the way you can fight them, if I can find something here, is you go up, you watch your life drain a little bit, you come out and let it build back up. Then you go up and approach the monster, do a little bit to it, and come back. If the monster, so you basically come forward and go back, and come forward and go back. You don't want to stand and try to kill that monster. The other problem that I've ran into are the crystals that drop on the ground. Like a lightning monster will form crystals. If you don't pay attention, I get in a bad habit of just standing still because like this thing isn't doing any damage to me. So I'll just stand there and try to fire trap it down. Well, then I get hit with all these crystals and stuff because I'm not paying attention to it. Ideally, you want to stay moving as much as possible. But if you get lackadaisical and just stand around, you may get killed by those crystals. If you notice them, you can get away from them. There are the red ring monsters I mentioned. There's also corpse explosion. A lot of times I'll open a not a chest, but whatever those things are called. What are these called? Strong boxes. I'll open a strong box and it'll have corpse explosion, and I die from that. So you want to be aware of the red ring monsters. You want to be aware of corpse explosions. You want to be aware of the crystals that drop on the ground, the on death effects, like the big poison drops that come down, all that kind of stuff. If you get like me and you get complacent where you're just sitting there dropping fire traps, that can kill you very easily. It can one-shot you. So definitely be careful of all that kind of stuff. All right, to wrap this whole thing up, hopefully this has been helpful to you. This is basically the culmination of everything I've learned about Righteous Fire, all the different things that I've figured out or things that I've attempted. This is not a perfect build. What I have currently is not a perfect build. It could certainly be improved. There's a lot of ways to make this better. And I know I'm at certain limitations as far as bossing goes because I don't have as good of armor as I could get, because I'm not doing as much damage as I could. If I had better crafting, if I had better this, better that, there's a lot of ways to improve this build. I recognize where those deficiencies are, but this build has a lot of promise from the early game all the way up into the end game. As far as bossing goes, your boss fights will go a lot slower, and if they go super slow and you're dying to a lot of mechanics, you probably need to do some work on your build to make it better. Because I had a lot of issues with the Searing Exarch and the Eater of Worlds until I improved my gear quite a bit. That improved my life. It improved the ability to stay alive. It also improved my damage enough to where I could attack those and get those 2 Void Stones. I have not gotten the other 2 Void Stones. The Maven fight I did once. It was not too bad, but I had never approached any of those mechanics before. I didn't know how they worked. So that, like I said, I only did the fight once. I've only had the opportunity once. I'm working up my second chance at that fight. Where's that stuff at? It would be under the fragment section. So I'm 8/10 of the way to the next one. But then I've done some of these other fights. I don't remember if it was this one or this one here from these groups of fragments. But I've done several of these, like the stuff you get from these sacrifices. These were not bad. I think this one here I did, and it wasn't bad. But then some of these others I've attempted, they were very difficult. Again, this is probably a doable thing, but where I'm at with the gear that I have right now needs to be better. So, to close all of this out, I'm hoping that with this next league, when we get into Affliction, I'm going to take everything that I've learned from this league and all the stuff I've learned with this build and the way it's gone. I hope to improve that, and I hope to be into these bossing fights the next time around and doing better with it. So I hope this has been helpful, and we will catch you on the next one. Take care.